morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to share, how delighted I am to be here, with you all. But before anything else, I'll start with a short disclaimer, and that is that I'm here more as an alum of IIT Delhi and also as a friend of Vikram. The views I'm sharing today are more personal, and don't confuse it with me being ambassador of India to the UAE. That's also true, but as you see in the screen, it's really important for us to understand geopolitical shifts and financial realignments, because this is something which is happening all the time, and this is the larger environment, the larger ecosystem in which we all operate. It's always changing, but what we have seen is that it has been changing probably at a much faster pace now than in the past. Yeah, this one? Yeah. So let me just step back a bit. Let me take you to the time when globalization was actually some kind of a buzzword, especially in the 80s. Everyone saw merit in global governance norms and harmonizations and economic synergies. WTO and G20 are perhaps a product of that, that mode in which people were, that globalization is the in thing and globalization helps all of us. If you recall, in 1995, the World Trade Organization was set up. And why was it set up? It was set up to actually provide a rule-based multilateral trading system. And then in 2008, the G20 was set up with its first summit in Washington, D.C., to coordinate a response actually at that time to the global financial crisis. G20 was nothing but an expanded form of G7, because it was very clear to the G7 countries at that time, the largest economies at that time, that they alone cannot drive world economy. They have to actually combine with the rest, at least the top 20 economies in the world. And that's how it started, and G20 was all about global financial governance, supply chains, and everything else. Similarly, COP also, if you look back, was about setting rules for climate change. You would have all heard about the Kyoto Protocol of 1997 and then the Paris Agreement of 2015. But then something started changing, which gave way to a lot of uncertainty. First, it was the COVID shock, which disrupted not only economics and supply chains, but the way countries dealt with each other, the way individuals dealt with each other. It was each one for himself, and you would have seen that during that time, the vaccine issue, when the developed world, the countries of the developed world actually had multiple times the vaccine stockpile as compared to their own population. And then there was also India, which was not only catering to the demands of its people, but also demands of the world. We, at that time, shared our vaccine with more than 100 countries. That's why, we are always known as Vishwamitra for this vaccine diplomacy. But before, and then COVID did come to an end, but then before things could settle, we had the Ukraine crisis. Ukraine crisis also was almost settling down. Oil prices had settled. Agriculture supply chains had almost reestablished themselves. But then came the biggest disruption, as Mr. Dhariwal also mentioned, from very far off, from across the Atlantic, in the form of the Trump presidency. And we could feel the tremors of it everywhere. COVID could be called a black swan moment, but Trump was actually predictable to some extent, because all of us had some experience about his first presidency. But the ramifications have been far and wide and on everyone, friends and foes alike. Actually, the friends of the US have lost more. The foes have perhaps gained, and in today's situation, it's perhaps countries like China, Russia, and North Korea, which are not really at the, at the whipping end, but it's more like Europe, India, partners like China, like Japan and Korea, which have really had it bad. From the Indian perspective, I think we have entered a very turbulent phase. 25 years of building this relationship with the US ever since President Clinton's time has got jolted. WTO which was all about certainty in terms of tariffs, is in dire straits. This the very fundamental MFN principle of WTO is quite shattered. And most importantly, from the IVCAP perspective, financial flows are also impacted in a big way. But the reality has changed, and it's important for us to deal with reality. Geopolitics is definitely reshaping global capital flows. Investment and financial flows are actually tilting towards politically aligned blocks, the so-called friend-shored locations. According to UNCTAD figures in 2024, FDI actually fell by 11%, with Europe taking the biggest hit. It was down by about 58%. VCs recovered in 2023, but they got largely concentrated in AI, climate tech, fintech, payments, and resilient supply chain infrastructure. Capital is actually now started following new corridors, where there's food, energy, digital, some of the areas which Vikram had mentioned, and also avoiding the choke points. It could be the political choke points, it could be other kind of choke points. Countries definitely want to de-risk both currencies as well as the payment systems, because you all are aware of the weaponization of SWIFT, and more countries moving to some kind of a local currency trade settlement mechanism. It's certainly time for realignments and for friend-shoring. The US, for us, has been a very strategic partner, and so has the UAE. So just to bring in the UAE perspective and just to compare and contrast US with the UAE, of course, one is a very big country, UAE is a relatively small country. US is pretty far off, but then we have been connected with the US in a very intimate way. UAE is much closer home. Both are, for us, strategic partners. If you look at our trade, US is at the top position, whereas UAE is at number 3, but very close. If you look at our export destination, US is the top export market for us. UAE is the second. In terms of diaspora, the overall diaspora, perhaps US is definitely the biggest. But if you look at number of Indian nationals, Indian passport holders, it is certainly the UAE with about 4.5 million Indians. US is a hub of innovation, is a very established hub of innovation, but then UAE is also not far behind. I mean, the way it is, the pace at which it is catching up is really, mind-boggling. But then there are clear differences as well. In the US, Indians face some kind of uncertainty, but in the UAE, Indians are always welcome. Actually, there is an influx of Indians, including HNIs, techies, startups. In a time of adversity, we have to see what more we can do with the UAE. The building blocks are definitely in place. We have the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, we have the Bilateral Investment Treaty, the CEPA, as they call it in short, was signed about 3 years ago, and within 3 years, trade has actually shot up about 37%, and last year, we crossed $100 billion. As far as investments are concerned, UAE was a late starter, but it's already the 7th largest source of FDI, clocking about $23 billion already. And the interesting thing is that much of the UAE investment actually comes via vehicles and instruments, either in the US or in Singapore or in Europe. So the net UAE investment in India is actually much larger. We also have a high-level task force on investment, and that's a very institutionalized structure which is co-chaired by our Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, and Sheikh Hamid on the other side, who's MD of ADIA. We have set up Bharat Mart in Jabal Ali. We have set up this local trade currency mechanism, which is, again, as I mentioned, we have to de-risk ourselves as far as currencies are concerned. And the good thing is that already about 7 to 8% of our bilateral trade is being invoiced through this local currency trade settlement mechanism. We have done a big oil consignment. We have done gold consignment, food consignments, and it's gradually catching up very well. Another thing to be kept in mind is that the UAE has, after signing their first CEPA with India in 2022, they have signed a web of about 29 CEPAs with major economies like Indonesia, Israel, Australia. And that provides for us a platform to actually, a platform through which we can reach out to at least these 29 countries on a preferential basis. You would have heard about IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. a very ambitious project because it's not just about transporting containers, it's also about transporting energy, transporting data. And on that, we are at least moving very fast, and we are in the process of setting up a virtual trade corridor, which is now all the trials have been done, and we're just looking for an opportunity to announce it. And through this virtual trade corridor, actually, it reduces our transit times, it reduces paperwork, and also transaction costs. Fintech and digital currencies have a big role, actually, if you see, in reshaping global trade and remittances also, because fintech has given speed, ease, and low costs. You'll be happy to know that, like we have our RuPay card, a very tried and tested debit card, credit card stack for the last 12 years. When the UAE was to find an alternative to the established Master and Visa cards, they did reach out to us, and our suggestion to them was that why reinvent the wheel when we have a tried and tested stack? So they have based their own debit and credit card stack called the J1 card entirely on a RuPay card stack. UPI and the instant payment platform of the UAE, which is called ANI, are working very well, and UPI acceptance in UAE is pretty widespread. It's not yet 100%, but I would say it's something between 60 to 70%. And that really helps our 4.5 million Indians who call UAE home, and as well as the 5.5 million Indians who travel to the UAE every year. It also helps remittances. As you know, India and the UAE are actually the world's second largest remittance corridor after the US-Mexico corridor. Last year it was about $22 billion, and fintech actually processes about 60% of these remittances. We are also working on CBDCs and messaging systems. So messaging systems, the trials are all done. CBDC work is going on, and it will soon be time to bid goodbye to entities like SWIFT and also the correspondent banks in somewhere located in London or in New York, where we pay all these charges which are very avoidable. UAE in general, and I think Dubai in particular, can act as catalyst for collaboration between Indian startups and UAE investors. The model of several successful Indian startups is already something which we call as build in India and scale via the Gulf. And in the Gulf, in particular the UAE. In the UAE, particularly Dubai. Abu Dhabi, as many of you might have heard, is known as the capital of capital, with about 1.7 trillion US dollars assets under management, and all these big sovereign wealth funds like ADIA, Mubadala, ADQ, International Holding Company, and others. They've already invested in major Indian startups like Lenskart, Dream11, Purple, you name it, and they are there. There is a similar appetite in Dubai, though Dubai might not have the big sovereign wealth funds like Abu Dhabi, but it can be a great platform to pitch and act as a great aggregator for financing. There are also many stories about UAE LPs, both sovereign wealth funds and family offices backing venture studios and joint labs with Indian institutes, and then using the UAE as the first international market. Coming to our DPI as a software power tool in geo-economic diplomacy. Certainly in today's day and age, soft power is more than just Bollywood and cuisine and culture. There is a harder part of this soft power, which is DPI, fintech, startups. Today, as many of you might know, that UPI processes over 12 billion transactions in a month. Aadhaar covers about 1.3 billion plus people. And ONDC is actually reimagining e-commerce interoperability. These are not just pilots, they are proven population scale systems. And for us, UPI has actually become some kind of a brand globally representing Indian innovation. During COVID time, you would have seen how effective our delivery system was. And it was, I think, riding on the back of our DPI. The JAM trilogy, you all know. And the JAM, not only the benefits of JAM, which we have seen in India, but also globally, as far as Global South is concerned, it's really helped us a big deal. Talking about IIMs and IITs, which is very, again, integral to the Ivy Cap initiatives. You'll be happy to know that the first major overseas branch of IIT Delhi, or IITs, was set up in Abu Dhabi in January last year, and it's flourishing very well. And just 2 days back, the first overseas campus of IIM was set up in Dubai, IIM Ahmedabad, inaugurated by, in the presence of our Education Minister, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan. But what's important is that these two campuses are fully funded by the Dubai government on the one hand and by the Abu Dhabi government on the other, which means the kind of ownership they actually take in both these institutes. Needless to say that when IIT Delhi was inaugurated, it was done by Sheikh Khalid, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. And the IIM campus in Dubai was inaugurated by the Crown Prince of Dubai. The IIT Delhi campus is actually very well entrenched in the innovation ecosystem of Abu Dhabi. It has MOUs with 4 major entities there, the MBZ University for AI, the Sorbonne University, Zayed University, Khalifa University, and I see Professor Sanghi here, who's very much driving the innovation there. 2 days back, in the presence of our Education Minister, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan, the first ever overseas Atal Incubation Center was also set up in IIT Delhi. I think that will further push innovation. If you look at it, these might seem to be branches of IIT Delhi and IIM Ahmedabad, but it's more than branches. These are actually knowledge bridges, because they are embedding India's premier institutes in the UAE's innovation system. One big advantage which has resulted out of the presence of these two have been the connect with the alumni. I understand from Vikram that there are more than 5,000 alums of IITs in the UAE, and about 1,000 have just come maybe in the last 3 years. So UAE has becoming such a magnet for the alums. And when we were in the process of setting up these two institutes, we actually discovered there are so many IITians there, so many IIM alumni there, who are very keen to actually contribute not only to this mission, but also to work together. And I think that's where that's a big resource which we can also tap into when we talk about promoting innovation in India and commercializing it. The country also has become a very big regional talent magnet, not only due to the Trump effect, but also because of so many other attractions which the country offers. I think when backed by global IIT IIM alumni networks, they create an unparalleled triangle of innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital flows. The triangle does not just connect India and the UAE. I think it positions our partnership as a force multiplier for the wider global south and a driver of resilience in global innovation. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.